Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. This episode today is one of these stories that I always think about when we first created Truth Talks. It's about real life, real stories, real people. And this guest today is going to tell you a story that it has a lot of twists and tons of life lessons that I think if we listen to this story, we process this story, I think this is one that has a capability of really helping a lot of people. So without further ado on that, Laura, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So this story actually is another one that came to me through producer Chad, and it when he first told me about the story and told me about you. Obviously, we always do a pre-interview just to see if it kind of fits into what it is that we like to run here on True Talks. And during the pre-interview, I was blown away. This is a story of massive amounts of courage, lot of hardship in this story. And I don't want to preface too much of this myself. I want you to start from the top and give first of all the overview of the story, and then let's get into kind of the details.
So my story is, and where I come from right now is just having a real heart and a passion to help men and women that are coming out of abusive relationships long term, kind of what to expect, what nuggets to take, what life skills they could come out with. And so my story starts back in 1999, and I was married for a total of 17 years. And it's just 1989 is when I got divorced or married real quickly, and I was just thrown into a very abusive relationship with my ex-husband. There was physical, emotional, psychological, um, right from the beginning, and I just didn't really have the skill set at that time to know or the value. Hey, I need to get out of this, and I let it continue for 17 years, and just what I've gone through, and now just realizing this is my chance to tell my story, but also just if it helps anybody, one person, that's the takeaway from it. So in 99, like I said, I got married real quickly, and there was just a lot of abuse. Some of the extreme of the abuse was like, we live out here in Arizona where it's extremely hot in the summer. And if we would be driving somewhere and he was not happy with something, he would drop me off on the side of the road and make me walk home, or I'd have to call. And this was back before we had cell phones. So that was just a lot of the extent of the abuse. Making me sleep on the floor and stuff. I wasn't worthy of sleeping in the bed. And it was extreme abuse right away. And again, I just didn't really have the skills to know how to say, I made a mistake. I need out of this. I need help. I had family probably willing to help, but I just did not know how to ask for that. So in 2000, our first son was born, and I'd actually left a little bit when I was pregnant with my son for about 3 months, not quite. I left for a while just to get to safety and be with some friends. And part of my story is just having kind of been programmed a lot. I didn't really grow up in the church, but I started going to church early on, and a lot of it was just divorce is wrong. You figure things out, you pray through it, you have more faith, things will work out, but divorce is just really not the answer. So it's kind of being programmed a lot to just think that is not the way, is we can work this out. So I had left and stayed with some friends up here in Phoenix at the time, and a lot of it was, well, just pray through this and it'll get better, because God can work anything. Well, that was just not the reality of how it was really going. So when I got back in 2001, when my son was about a year old, that was when my husband was first arrested. It had gotten pretty bad one night, and our neighbors in our apartment had heard us. And so they called the police. So the police came. My ex was arrested, spent a week in jail. And that's kind of when all the vengeance started. Well, you brought this on, therefore I'm going to pay for it. And like I said, hindsight is looking back saying, man, that was your time to leave. Take your son, leave. Again, didn't quite have the knowledge, the value to just say, hey, I need to do this. I need to reach out for help.
Well, just a second. Tell me, tell me when you go back in your mind now, what what were you telling yourself? I mean, obviously, you were saying divorce is not the answer. We'll pray through this and so on and so forth. But did you at that time recognize this wasn't a good situation at all for you and probably wasn't going to get better?
No. I probably thought about that, but you kinda train your mind when you're in that to not think. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's like you just go through the motions, and if it gets better, it gets better. If it doesn't, then you just learn to survive in those skills you have. And it's like looking back, it's like, how could you think that? But it is like you're in this tunnel and you're only seeing what's right in front of you and maybe only inches in front of you. And that's probably how to survive that day. It's not what's going to happen in the past or this is not right. And there were times maybe that I had those glimpses of just going, yeah, this is so messed up. But then again, I believed it was my fault.
And how old were you at this time?
So I was 20, about 21 at this time, 21, maybe close to 22.
And can you give me what a moment of good looked like in that? Was there moments that he was loving?
Um, I look at it now and I don't know if it was necessarily loving because as I look back now, I can honestly say with all depths, I didn't have any love for my ex-husband. I just didn't. But I think there was moments of maybe he did something kind and I took that as things are going to change and it's amazing. See, he does love me. And it kind of blocked out all the bad. And, that was just kind of the mindset I was in.
Yeah. Sorry to interject there, but this is where I wanna go with this. I wanna ask these tough questions so that somebody going through this can have an idea of what, maybe a glimpse inside of what they think might be going on, but it might not actually be happening.
Yeah. And just to kind of put in there too, at the time too, when you're going through this, you do have those real moments of just blacking out a lot. And I still have things like that I deal with where I look back and I'm like, yeah, I don't remember those periods of life or when my kids were little. And because when you're in that and for so long, your body just adapts to it and your mind blocks out a lot. So there might be parts I remember, but not whole like long years. So that is just something I still kind of deal with. But then in 2001, like, so after the arrest had happened, there was still just he was going through different jobs. We were always constantly dealing with either the courts or the police just with road rage, or that just kind of became part of our lives. There was just always the cops interjected some way in something that he was in trouble for. In 2004, my twins were born. I had a hard pregnancy with them, and I spent 5 weeks in the hospital just because I had went into pre-labor. So that was really hard because I never really left my son, did anything because they were with me constantly. So I had to have family kind of watch him, and I was in the hospital, and that was all a lot in itself. And then when it came out, it was just me figuring out how to make it each day with three little kids, two newborns and a 4-year old. So it was a lot. And I think there was times like you were just saying that I did probably look at that and say, I could do this myself, but I didn't act on it. I probably just thought it every once in a while, like, I could probably raise these kids on my own and be much better off.
Now, did family know this was going on?
Um, my some of my family did, and they had said, like, "You need to get out. This is not good," but I just didn't. I didn't take those avenues at the time. I just didn't wanna look like a failure, and I didn't know how to get out, and so I think at a point it became like, you can't come to us anymore for help because we are trying. So yes, I did have that support there, but I didn't know how to use it.
Okay, for somebody going through the same thing though, would you say that when your family knew and they were telling you to get out, your friends knew telling you to get out, is that mindset you're so deep into it, you're having these blackout moments, you just can't hear it?
Yes, I believe a lot of it. And I actually didn't have much friends at this time. That was not part of what we had. We never kept friends. I was kind of alienated from my family. And though they knew the surface level, I don't know that they knew every bit of the depth of it. But yes, I think I was just so you're in that tunnel vision kind of that you don't listen to anybody. You don't see what's going to come out of this. And you're just trying to, in that survival mode of one more day, I can make this. And that goes on for years.
How did you, what was your, like, mental outlook? Were you when you look back at it and you think about it, were you sad all the time?
No, and I think that's anybody that had known me and still does, they'll say one thing we know of Laura, she is never sad, she's always got a smile on her face, she can make it through anything, and I think that's just I love people and that was my heart, but I just always tried to look at the positive in it and go, "It can get better," and I just always seemed happy, But if I look back, like, at pictures now and I just look and I go, "Ooh, I looked sick. I did not look happy," and so maybe that is what other people were seeing, because I thought I was putting on a pretty good show of, "We're making this work and stuff," and inside I was just slowly dying.
Great introspect. So you have the twins.
So we have the twins and I'm raising them. In 2008, a lot had really just gone on in that year. My mother-in-law had passed away, and so that in itself is very traumatic, but my ex-husband just had a lot of emotions he wasn't dealing with healthy or even rightly at that time, and we had moved yet again, and there was a moment when I remember I could just see even more of his mental state going downhill, and we were kind of in a remote place then. We lived on, like, 3 or 4 acres in a rental, and I can remember one day we were outside and, I don't remember the conversation around it, but he had, like, a pocket knife on him, and I can remember he pulled it out and put it, like, right next to his leg and said, "Well, I could do something to you right now, and nobody would ever find your body." And I can remember that just being a moment of just like, "How did I get here?" But yet, you think, "Oh, just leave." That's the I didn't know how, and I mean, that even brought that much more fear into me. 3 little kids, I mean, I didn't know what to do, so 2008 was just pretty rough year, and in 2009, there was a night when he had just really gone off the handle and, took it out on our kids, and I just knew that was the night I needed to get away. I was like, "Okay, this is it," and when I knew he was in for the night in the bedroom and I think he was asleep or I just knew it was okay, like I said, we pretty much lived out on a remote area. I think our closest neighbor was, like, half a mile, maybe a mile away, and, I just grabbed my 3 sons, and we lived out in an area where rattlesnakes were very prominent. We saw them almost daily, and I just took my 3 sons, and it was at nighttime, and I didn't put shoes or anything on them, and we ran. We ran as quick as we could to my neighbor's house. I didn't know my neighbor, but we knocked on the door, and this was later in the evening, I wanna say maybe 10, 11. So he had answered, and he was an ex-cop and just a very kind of tough guy. And he was very upset that I had come with the 3 kids and he did not want to be involved in it. And he was very rough about it. He did call like somebody we knew at the time, I believe it was a pastor, and said, "You need to come and get him." But he was like, "I'm not involved in this. I want nothing to do with it." I'm not sure why that was the response, but yet to me it just solidified, see, nobody wants to deal with this. How do I handle it? Because nobody's gonna help me through it. And I am thankful and gotta say, I am thankful for the people that picked us up and let us stay with them for a while. They were my pastor and his wife, and I am very thankful for times like that. So we left. My ex was arrested that night because I called the police and there were some child abuse charges there with my son. And so it was just going through that. I had to go and testify. And at that time, my family came down and helped me. They helped me get an apartment, a car. I got into college, and why it looks like, man, you had everything. Your family is willing to help you for about 4 months, I think. I went on with my life. And then as soon as he got out and he started contacting me and, we can make this work. I am sorry. This was the turning around. Um, Somewhere in my mind, I thought, yeah, okay, this time it can work. And, again, that's just one of those things I look back now and I said that was a real pivotal moment that I wish I had done differently. I don't know what made me think it would go back. It wasn't this tremendous love I had. It was just maybe obligation or I'm not a failure. I can make this work because I always thought everybody thought I was a failure. They probably weren't thinking that, but that's kind of how I felt. And so we went back, and the second I kind of went back, of course, it was very hard for my family to know that. And the second I kind of decided, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna give up the apartment. We're gonna go back. I can remember we were in the car with him one day, and he's like, "I really don't want you guys, me and the kids." And it just went downhill from there. The breaking of glass and the threatening, and I'm gonna get you back for this. And I was just like, what do I do? I just didn't know. And even though mentally, I think that kind of put me down there to just feel like, okay, this isn't something I can recover from. I messed it all up again. And in hindsight, I think I was just trying to do right by my kids. And I wasn't, but I didn't know that. I didn't have the skill set to have the knowledge, to have the critical thinking skill to sit down and go, this is going to have an outcome and a very negative one if I don't change it. This narrative does not need to be this way, but I didn't have those skills at the time. So here I was back into it. 2011, my daughter was born. So I had 4 kiddos, and there was a gap between them, my oldest and my youngest, but it was just still a thing where we were surviving and doing the best, but I'd gone back and it was hard. And of course, my family did their best for my sake to try to just be like, okay, if this is what you want, but they just worried constantly for me. And in 2014, we'd moved up to Phoenix. And during this time, some additional charges were put on my ex. He had assaulted somebody else with a knife and stabbed him. He had caused 2 really bad auto accidents from road rage. So I think at this time we're probably about 6 he was about 6 cases deep. So, like I said, going to court and all this was just that's how we lived life, and I was always the one I had to write the court notes for him, like, what happened and why it wasn't his fault. He made me write those, and if they weren't right, then I paid for it. I can remember, like, one time he didn't like the way I wrote it, so he punched holes all over the walls, and it was just so dark and so hard, but 2014 was, I say, the start of a turning. There just came a point where my son was older, and, I was just standing at the sink one day doing dishes, and I can remember I almost felt like I literally had died inside. I was like, "This is my life. I mean, I'll never get to probably see my grandkids. I'll never get to just raise my kids with freedom. Like, I don't know what to do." And I remember just standing there, and I just felt like my life crushed inside, and I think it was about a month later, my ex had gotten pretty physical with my oldest son, and, I remember I was completely traumatized by that, and obviously, so is my son. It was just a hard thing, and that's when things were shifting. So in August, 7th of 2015, I've come to find out again that my ex was cheating, and it was with men, prostitutes. Uh, there was just so much, um, I don't even know how to say it, just dysfunction in what was going on that I just finally, I don't know, I say it's a God moment of just, I was done. I was absolutely 100% done. Found out he was cheating again, and I just went into the room. I threw the phone at him and I said, I'm done. And he didn't believe me. He was like, yeah, right, you're not done. And I went downstairs. I wrote 4 pages of notes to him of everything I'd wanted to say for all those years. And I just like, it just spilled out. And I went back into bed and I laid down and I remember just hearing a voice. I say this is one of those God moments of like, it is done. And I went to sleep with more peace than I had had in probably 17, even before then, just some things with my life before then, 19 years. I just slept and I got up in the morning and he was like, "You're not leaving." And I said, "Get out. Just get out. I'm not doing this." And he had always told me, "I'll kick you in the kids out before I ever leave a home." And he left. And I just say that's a God moment. And he left. And I said, "I'm done." And I never looked back. And it started to get pretty hard after that, and that's where my heart is really just to help people understand when you leave, there's a shifting. You may not be physically abused at that moment, but especially if you're co-parenting or anything like that, there's a lot of struggles that will come at you very quickly, and you just gotta be prepared. I had to get a restraining order within, I think it was a month or so for him threatening to do something to me and leave our kids alone, so I went and got a restraining order. Did not mean I didn't have to co-parent, and that is so hard. It was hard, and all of a sudden, my kids who had, um, always had to guard themselves and watch, obviously, how they acted, what they said, were free to just be kids now. Well, it doesn't quite transition that easily, like, their emotions just I kinda say it just threw up all over. It was very, very, very hard, and there was a lot of repercussions afterwards I had to, but in those moments, there was so much God, and it's I call 'em miracle God moments, like, so I had been a stay-at-home mom most of the time. Here I am. I had to get a job. I started working for $9 an hour at a daycare so my daughter could be with me, taking my kids to school, doing it all, with a restraining order, trying to figure out how to navigate every day when he was calling police on me for saying I abused our kids. And there was just that retaliation that was still there. And we had a moment where I had to move out of my house at that point, and we were in a rental still. And I didn't have any credit. I had no money. I didn't know what to do, and though my parents were helping me a little bit, this was, like, something I really kinda need to figure out, and, my sons had mentioned to some friends of theirs that my mom needs a house, and that just became this moment of, where I'm still renting from my place. I've been here almost 7 years. this lady called me and said, "Hey, we have one of the biggest rental companies here on this side of Phoenix." And she's like, "We have our own personal house we're trying to get. It's a four-bedroom. You can have it. Don't worry about credit. Don't worry about anything. We'll worry about the down or the deposit in like 6 months." And that was just, and they had totally renovated this house. So I had like this house, a four-bedroom one. I was looking at two-bedroom apartments. I did not know what I was going to do. And I remember just sitting there crying and being like, "Thank you. Just thank you for this." Because I really did not know what I was gonna do. So, there was a lot of moments like that where people just came along, helped us, and I couldn't have made it without them. And then one of the biggest moments, and I still look back to this one because it was just one of those defining moments in my life, is about 6 months later, I did need to come up with some money for the deposit, and I had been worrying over it, $1,200, and I did not have it. And so my kids were with their dad that weekend, and I went out and I was driving by and I saw a yard sale. Well, I had like no money to me. I believe I probably had $5 in my pocket. And I stopped by a yard sale because I saw a shoe rack that I wanted, and the guy wanted $2 for it. Well, me and this guy, he was actually an 80, I think he was like 86-year-old World War II vet. We just started talking. He was telling me a lot about the just the hard times he'd been through. I kind of gave him an overview. I didn't mention money, nothing. I was just kind of telling him a little bit of my situation where I was coming out of and how much I wanted that shoe rack. Well, he ended up just giving me the shoe rack, but at the end of, I think we talked for like 2 hours. He went in the house and came back out and said, "I know I'm supposed to give you this." He handed me $1,200 he had already before he'd even known. I had never mentioned an amount. I'd never even really mentioned money that I needed. Just, here we are doing our thing. And it was just amazing. He said, "I didn't even want to have this yard sale, but God told me I need to have it." And he said, "You're the reason why." And I still look back to that and go, if we get in hard times, yet there's still that moment when things can work out. Just, you know, that miracle can come. So when you think it's like, and that's something I just try to encourage people. I know it can seem like you have no way when you leave, you have no money, anything. Just have a little faith that those moments can work out because they will. And
I don't know if it's a little faith. I think that's a whole hell of a lot of faith. We do love to run faith-based stories, and, after the pre-interview, I was super excited that that part of the story is absolutely my favorite, right? Like, I mean, how does that even happen? But as I recap this, and I thought a lot about the story since we talked the first time, but it was like, religion kind of got you into that space, where you had those sensations that just work through it, pray through it, and I think a lot of people struggle with that a little bit, where they go into the religious aspect of what they think that meaning means, and yet at the end of your story here, we hear really how God Himself makes these miracles, not a religion, not a pathway or a thought process, but there's just no other explanation for $1,200. There just isn't. And I don't even question that. Like, to me, that's not even a question. That was designed to happen. I mean, the guy basically tells you that this was designed to happen. A couple questions that I have going forward, though. Is he still around?
yes, so I got we had 50-50% custody, and then he took me to court in 2020 stating he wanted to have full custody. I was a bad mom. I ended up getting awarded full custody. So he still has parenting time, and I do still deal with occasionally the police, the emails, court. Yeah, I'm still in it, but I've just got such a better footing, and I'm learning as I go just how to navigate this and take care of it. And that's, like I said, part of my passion is just to let people know you may have to deal with this for a while, but there are avenues, there is help. There's a lot of ways to go through this and learn from kind of what I went through. There's ways to make it a little bit easier when you leave and how to get help sooner.
Though, here's what I always contemplate. When I hear these stories, my brain goes crazy. But somehow out of all that mess, you got four great kids, right?
I do.
And that
Well, kids.
that perplexes me, like it perplexes me. So on one side it's hell, and the other side it's heaven. It blows me away. Do you have any thoughts or feelings about that?
It does too. Sometimes I just look at it and I'm like, how are they so amazing and how can we, but you know what? We've all just kind of come together and we go through bad days. Yeah, we do. We go through good days, but regardless, we communicate and we do it together. And the one thing I always said is I would start from when I left and I would be there for my kids. I chose not to date, not to marry, not to do anything, but to raise my kids and put all that time I lost with them into helping them become good adults that have life skills, that know their value, that can watch me. I'm 3 classes away from getting my bachelor's in behavioral health. You guys, no matter what has happened in the past, we can make good come from it, and you've got me 100% behind you. So that is what I decided to change that narrative.
And that's just so amazing because every time I do a show, like, I like to put myself in everybody's situation, everybody's shoes. I couldn't put myself in your shoes. I wouldn't have stayed, I don't think. You never know, right? But I can't imagine what you went through. I can't imagine what it even is now, right? But at the end of this, and my last thought as I was thinking, how am I going to run this show today, was how incredibly courageous you are for coming on and telling this story. I mean, the guy's still around. You got all these things that you're still working through and still going through, but the success that you've now found from the hell that you were in, the only word that came to me is just courageous for you to come on and tell other women, men, even men need to hear this more than anyone. Just how courageous that is to come on and tell this story and without the voice shaking. I literally, I'm an emotional baby. So after we did the pre-interview, I was just like, I was kind of like, oh my God, I just can't even imagine this. But that's the word that came up, is courageous, and I hope that hits you in your heartstrings, because it's what you're doing here is so massively important to the world. Why you were chosen to be the one to go through that, I don't know. I question that as well. Why were you chosen for that pathway? I'm sure you've thought about that many times. But sometimes I think, whatever that course or path that we had to get on to get to where we're going, I don't think that's given to the weak. So I think you're extremely strong for what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you hearing my story and just giving me that platform to be able to speak. And I know that's the nugget in it, is just take what I've done and how can it help somebody else?
That's beautiful. It's exactly what we do on Truth Talks. I want to leave you with one thing though. So you are now in the behavioral sciences, or getting ready to be in the behavioral sciences. What's the first thing you tell someone?
Um, I think besides even telling is just listening. No judgment, no nothing, just tell me your story and let's see what we can figure out. Because I do have a lot of people that will reach out and say, I'm going through this or that. And it's just like, maybe I can give them a little bit of advice on, hey, try this or take this step right now, and it'll save you a lot in the end. But just listening. Sometimes people just need to be heard without that judgment of, why didn't you? You should have. I'm just love to listen and see what I can help in that aspect.
I don't think an expert ever becomes an expert out of a book. I think an expert becomes an expert by living through it. And so I'm sure you're going to be able to give a lot of people a lot of really good expert advice. We look forward to following up with you. Stay in touch with us. Continue this journey for success, because now maybe you only had a handful of people, but now after this platform, you have a lot of people now cheering for you. So remember that when times get tough, there's a whole lot of people behind you that you probably don't even know.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was an amazing job. You did
I
amazing.
appreciate it.
All right.